So is the Kraken real? After all the scientific evidence we've found lately, I would say so. I mean, we've all heard the story of Moby Dick and the story of the giant sea monster attacking the ship. And what do you guys think? Is that real? Well, let's talk about that today. So in 1874, the magazine of Natural History reported that two men were out on a small boat on October 26th near Portugal Cave in Conception Bay. Basically, they saw an object floating in the water off in the distance, so they went over toward it to see what it was. When they got to it, they thought it was the debris of a wreck, and one of the men poked it with his gaff. As soon as they poked it with his gaff, it basically sprung to life and exposed a beak the size of a 6-gallon keg. So this is a giant, massive beak. And basically, as soon as it exposed the beak, it grabbed the boat violently and smashed its beak into the boat, which is what a squid would do when it attacks its prey. It wraps its tentacles around and it jams its beak in to start to feed, basically. After the giant squid smashed its beak into the bottom of the boat, basically its two long tentacles came up and started to wrap around the boat, and one of the men on the boat got an axe and chopped the tentacles off. The squid then retreated away in the water, leaving a trail of ink for 200 or 300 yards as it swam away. So also in 1874, on May 10th, a report was made by several men aboard the Strathowan that was leaving Colombo for Madras, and it was going through the Bay of Bengal. So off in the distance they saw a small boat, and the boat was named the Pearl. The boat was being rocked and shook violently, and it seemed like something had a hold of it, something huge. And so they basically, as they were coming up to it, this is in the old days now, they got closer and the ship had capsized and the men were thrown into the water off of the Pearl. So the Strathowan continued up to the men, and it was able to pick up and rescue the men. So as this giant squid is attacking the Pearl, the men did get a chance to shoot the giant squid, and this only made it more angry, and it attacked the ship more furiously and flipped it over. Apparently, two of the men did get grabbed by the giant squid and dragged down into the depths, and another man apparently or potentially drowned. So 5 men were rescued, and 3 men didn't make it back from the giant squid attack of the Pearl. The squid that attacked the Pearl was said to have a body as wide as the ship and tentacles as thick as wood. So, I mean, you could imagine this would be a massive squid if it happened. You know, this is a bunch of people's testimonials from 150 years ago. So, around that time, stories like this would kick off of several sightings in the end of the 1800s. Stories of the Kraken and Scandinavian mythology and giant squid sightings began around this time. So back in these times, the giant squid was said to be floating off in the distance and generally look like a small island or some type of thing that the sailors would be curious about, and they would go up to it and then they'd get attacked. Generally, the squid is believed to get up to around 60 feet long and weigh around 1,000 pounds. So there are 2 types of huge squid. There's the giant squid and the colossal squid. Both are very large. The colossal squid ends up weighing a little bit more. The giant squid sometimes can be a little bit longer. But again, we don't know everything. I guess we haven't been down to the deep depths of the ocean. The examples that we've found so far in science, the largest one is 43 feet long. And that was actually a giant squid. It was believed that it weighed about 1,000 pounds. And as far as a colossal squid, we have a colossal squid that's 35 feet, and also weighed around 1,000 pounds. So the giant squid lives around 1,000 to 2,000 feet deep in the ocean, and the colossal squid actually lives a little deeper, around 3,200 to 6,500 feet deep in the ocean. So that's why the sightings of colossal squid are more rare. We generally, when we see a big squid, it's a giant squid. The colossal squid are very similar in anatomy. They all have 8 arms and 2 tentacles, or they both have. So they have similar parts. It's just that the colossal squid is a little bit bulkier. So the giant squid and colossal squid have the largest eyes in the animal kingdom. The giant squid eyes have been known to be 12 inches around, and the colossal squid eyes 15 inches around, basically the size of a dinner plate. They can see a predator up to 370 feet away, which coincidentally is about the range for one of their main predators. So the squid are cannibalistic. They eat other squid, they eat other small fish, and they feed a lot on the Antarctic toothfish and sometimes the occasional smaller whale. The giant squids have a sophisticated nervous system and a very complex brain that's very interesting to scientists. So if the giant squid is 2,000 feet deep in the ocean, and that's somewhat beyond our range unless we're using a submarine, submersible, or some type of submersible camera, you can only imagine the potential for size that we're unaware of. If we found one that's 43 feet long, you could only imagine what we haven't found down in the deep depths of the ocean. The giant squid are known to battle with the sperm whales quite often. They're one of the main diets for the sperm whale. The sperm whales are actually known to have large circular scars on their bodies that would show that a very, very large squid and the sperm whale had done battle in the past. Scientists are assuming generally the sperm whale wins these battles because of their sheer size and strength. However, we don't know. We're assuming from these scars that the whale lived on to tell the tale and won the battle, but scientists aren't sure. They know by looking in whale stomachs that squid or smaller squid are one of the main food sources for the sperm whale. So several squid beaks have been found in the stomachs of whales. A lot of times these squid beaks are huge. If you were to match up squid beak for the size of the squid, we're talking about a 1,300 to 15 pound squid that could be out there potentially. We don't know how long it would be, but we're talking about based on the size of the beak. So meaning the beak in the whale stomachs that have been found are larger than the beak of the 43-foot squid that had been found on the beach. A giant squid beak resembles a parrot's beak. They're generally up to 5 inches in length, and basically they're used to rip and tear food into manageable pieces for the squid to eat. It's one of the few hard parts, or the only hard parts on a squid. So as far as fossils or records or bones, this is really the only hard part of keratin on the squid. So unlike an octopus, a squid has actually 8 arms and 2 tentacles. So they have 2 more arms or tentacles than an octopus. Basically, the tentacles are 10 to 20 feet long on a giant squid, and the arms are 10 to 20 feet long, and the tentacles are up to 33 feet long. So these really long tentacles extend out and grab prey from a distance so they can be more stealthy and get prey at a distance to bring it into its beak. So inside of these tentacles are several small hooks, and the hooks latch on to its prey or to its enemy that it's fighting. The colossal squid has a little bit more pronounced hooks, and they can even be very large and even compared to tiger claws. Basically, the squid also have a lot of suction power. It's 100 pounds per square inch of suction power. So even though these animals live in very deep water, there have been over 200 documented specimens of gigantic squid. In Russia, 1981, they found a 13-foot squid. In 2003, they found a 20-foot squid with an 8-foot body or mantle. In New Zealand, a fishing boat caught a 30-foot, 1,000-pound colossal squid. So you can see the potential. I mean, if these squid live at 6,000 feet deep and we're fishing at 100 or 200 feet deep and we catch a small one, you could see how they could potentially get up to enormous sizes, even double of that 30 feet, as stated by eyewitnesses. When we have one from scientists at 43 feet, it sounds reasonable. So a giant squid, 21.5 feet long, and it had a tentacle measuring 35 feet, floated into the Trinity Bay in Newfoundland in 1878. A 57-foot specimen, including one 49-foot tentacle, washed up in Lyall Bay in Cook Strait, New Zealand in 1888. In 1958, a 47-foot specimen was found. There's also a report of a 21-meter-long specimen found off the coast of New Zealand with eyes that were 40 centimeters across. In 1980, Bruce Robinson, a scientist at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, was trolling for creatures at a depth of 2,000 feet in the Monterey Canyon off California when he brought his trolling device and he realized a giant squid was inside. The squid managed to escape, but he left behind a 12-foot piece of his tentacle just to show how big in size this squid actually was. So he actually took the tentacle and dissected it and said it was from a very strong swimmer, and he told the New Yorker he took a bite out of it and it was really bitter. I don't know why. So squids and octopuses are a member of the cephalopod family, and they fall into a few different classes of squid, octopuses, cuttlefish, and nautiluses. Giant squid have a large brain and a complex nervous system, as I mentioned, just like other cephalopods. They can problem solve and they're capable of opening containers to extract food. We haven't managed to keep any giant squid alive in captivity long enough to really study them and understand their living habits and abilities. Did you know all cephalopods have venom? They aren't really fatally to humans in most cases, but however, the blue-ringed octopus is one of the most venomous animals on the planet. Its venom has enough to kill 8 adult humans. So the Humboldt squid in Mexico are known for their aggression. They're known as Diablo Rojo, or the Red Devil. Fishermen that fall into the waters are said to be devoured by the squid within minutes. A traveler named Dr. Andre Jeckley had multiple stories of attack. He had one where on October 26, 1873, 3 men were fishing in Bell Island in Newfoundland. Basically, they were attacked by a huge giant squid, and one of the fishermen chopped off one of his arms, and the arm of the squid was apparently 46 feet long. Just to show the estimated length of the whole animal would have been much more. Sailors cleaning a ship near St. Iona Island and Cape Niagara were attacked by a giant squid, and 2 men were pulled into the deep, and one later died from his injuries. They did manage to cut off one of its tentacles that measured 25 feet long, and apparently there was still another 7 or 8 feet left of tentacle, so it looked like about a 33-foot long tentacle minus the 25-foot piece that was removed or cut off. So it would have been a very, very large squid, probably in the neighborhood of 50-some feet, if the tentacle itself was 33 feet long. The animal could have been much larger. We don't really know for certain. In 1941, survivors of the Britannia were allegedly attacked by a giant squid when they were floating on the ocean in their rescue raft. Basically, their ship sunk in the South Atlantic. One of the men was dragged away by the squid, and another escaped the same fate, though he suffered severe tentacle lacerations. So the man that got the severe tentacle wounds actually went to a scientist at Birkbeck College and had his story validated by showing his 1¼ inch marks or scars from the sucker wounds on his body. And the scientist basically said that this would have belonged to a 23-foot long squid. It's been called one of the only substantiated reports of a giant squid killing humans. In the 1930s, a German tanker called the Brunswick had 3 different encounters with giant squid while traveling in the sea in that area. Basically, a giant squid tried to attach to their ship unsuccessfully and was sucked back into the propellers and killed. As I mentioned, this was validated by Commander Goringnasater of the Royal Norwegian Navy. And like I said, this happened multiple times, and it happened between Hawaii and Samoa. So there are quite a few eyewitness accounts of squid swimming up alongside the ship at 25 miles per hour and trying to launch an attack, even at that speed. In 1978, a ship called the USS Stein was actually attacked by a giant squid, and the rubber coating on the ship actually had cuts in it from the squid's sucker marks. It actually made marks on the ship that needed to be repaired. In 1989, in the Philippines, 12 men were out fishing in a boat when they say a large octopus or squid reached up and overturned their boat. All of the men were able to grab onto the boat except for one 15-month-old child that drowned. The squid didn't continue attacking after it flipped the boat over, and the men were able to be rescued, but the child did pass away of drowning. In 2003, a crew was competing in a race around the world. Basically, their boat was attacked by a giant squid, and they stopped moving, so hoping the squid would lose interest. Thankfully, the squid did lose interest because they didn't have anything to fight off the giant beast, according to the captain. The squid left, and they proceeded on with their race. In 2012, a giant squid, believed to be 24 foot long, was actually filmed in its habitat not far off the coast of Louisiana in the United States. Basically, they used a flashing lure called the Medusa to lure in the squid. They seemed to be attracted by flashing lights, so the squid came out of the depths and kind of wrapped around and touched the camera and then just took off in 2012. And that is one of the very few sightings that we have in their habitat, since they live so deep and are so elusive. So one of the most recent sightings, or specimens rather, collected was in 2022 off the coast of South Africa, right off the tip of the coast. Basically, it washed up on the beach. It was just a 12-foot long specimen. But anytime we see a large example, it just reminds us that there may be others that are quite a bit larger out there. With all of the different examples we have, both the scientific collection of specimens and the evidence on boats and the evidence on humans, even though it is minimal, I do believe we could say that many of the stories of the Kraken and the past sea monsters may have been true. When we see the evidence in modern science today that these large squid do exist and could potentially be much bigger than we have evidence of, it really makes you wonder, it really makes you think, did these attacks happen? And how many of them have happened with ships being sunk and or disappearing that we don't know of? You know, people go missing in the ocean all the time, and we believe that sea monsters are a thing of myth. So thanks for following along. I really appreciate it. Keep following along for more content similar to this, and we really appreciate you guys. Thank you very much.